Cop unlawfully opens black man's case, turns pale after finding a document about his own dismissal. Under the bright afternoon sun in Atlanta, cars whizzed past the entrance of Havenwood Precinct, an unremarkable building harboring secrets. Inside, a young black man named Samuel Turner sat in a waiting area, calm but guarded, trying to file a routine complaint. Meanwhile, in a nearby cubicle, Officer Clayton Reeves, a cop known for pushing boundaries, flicked through files he had no authority to open. Suddenly, he stumbled across a locked folder labeled Turner, Samuel. Driven by curiosity or bias, he forced it open. What he saw next, deep within those confidential pages, turned his face ashen with shock. One single document threatened not just his job, but his entire life's facade. It was a sweltering Tuesday in Atlanta, the kind of heat that shimmered off the asphalt and made a short walk feel like a marathon. Inside Havenwood Precinct, sweat trickled down backs of officers and civilians alike. People bustled in and out, some posting bail, others lodging complaints, still others completing routine paperwork. At the front desk, Samuel Turner, soft-spoken but resolute, patiently waited to speak with an officer about a minor car accident. His crisp shirt stained with perspiration, a sign of both the scorching weather and the tension he felt around law enforcement. 2 weeks prior, he'd encountered hostility from an officer who'd belittled him during a traffic stop. He was determined to raise concerns with a higher authority, or at least file a formal statement. Meanwhile, deeper in the station, Officer Clayton Reeves, a tall, lean figure with a well-trimmed moustache, typed away at a shared computer. Known for bending rules, he'd earned side eyes from colleagues. As the shift dragged on, boredom or arrogance lured him to snoop on cases outside his jurisdiction. Spotting the name Turner, Samuel in a digital index, something pricked his interest, maybe a leftover prejudice from hearing about a young black man raising a ruckus. With a quick glance over his shoulder, Reeves clicked open the sealed file, never suspecting the explosive secret waiting inside. Behind the glare of the computer screen, Reeves navigated the secure database that typically required special permissions. He typed an override code, one gleaned from a higher-ranking detective's sticky note, a violation on multiple counts. Once inside, he saw entries referencing Samuel Turner, mostly benign details about a minor traffic complaint, a license check. Bored, he almost clicked away. But then he noticed a locked subfolder labeled Classified, Internal Affairs Reference. Curiosity raged. If Turner was just a random civilian, why an internal affairs reference? With a bit more hacking, Reeves forced it open. On the screen blossomed several scanned PDFs. Some seemed redacted, referencing a case 1907L. He scrolled deeper, hoping to find something incriminating about Turner that might amuse him or confirm biases. Instead, he found a single document that made his stomach drop, an official letter from the Atlanta Police Department's Internal Review Board regarding Clayton Reeves himself. The letter spelled out allegations of repeated misconduct, culminating in a recommendation for immediate dismissal pending final approval. A date was mentioned, one that was shockingly close, next Monday. Reeves gawked, face draining of color. His own name connected to Turner's file. This made no sense. Heart hammering, he realized the link must revolve around some complaint or evidence from Turner. Fear and anger burned in his gut. Reeves slumped in his chair, sweat beading on his brow. The words hammered in his head. Recommendation for immediate dismissal. They're about to fire me? Why? He'd had run-ins with internal affairs before, some excessive force allegations that fizzled out, a couple of smaller infractions, none this severe. He scrolled, scanning for further details. The record was partially redacted, but enough was visible to confirm that a certain S. Turner had submitted a formal complaint to IA about Reeves last month, citing evidence of unlawful stops, racial bias, and a threatened arrest without cause. The complaint had apparently been corroborated by camera footage from a nearby store. The board had concluded Reeves engaged in repeated misconduct, recommending termination. Blood pounded in Reeves' ears. He'd known tension existed with some of his so-called suspects, but never guessed it escalated to potential firing. He felt betrayal swirl within by the department, by whoever leaked evidence, by Turner for ratting him out. Furious, he slammed the keyboard, ignoring the stares of a passing colleague. I won't let him ruin me. A twisted plan formed in his mind. If he discredited or intimidated Turner, maybe IA would lose a key witness or see their case collapse. The ultimate irony, he found this secret in a file he had no right to open. Downstairs at the front desk, a harried sergeant called for the next visitor, gesturing for Samuel Turner. Just as Samuel stepped forward to give his statement about the rude traffic stop, Officer Reeves appeared, heart thrumming with adrenaline. I can't let him file more complaints or reinforce old ones, he told himself. Feigning a cordial approach, Reeves stepped in front. I'll handle Mr. Turner's complaint, Sarge, he said, ignoring the sergeant's confused frown. Samuel recognized him from the previous fiasco, the cop whose conduct had spurred him to lodge a complaint. Wariness rose. You're the officer who pulled me over last month, Samuel said, voice guarded. Reeves forced a half smile. Yes, small world. Let's talk in a private room. The sergeant hesitated, but Reeves insisted. I'm familiar with the case. It's best I address it directly. The sergeant, trusting rank, stepped aside. Once alone in a small interview room, Reeves shut the door, the overhead fluorescent hum intensifying the tension. Samuel's posture stiffened. Reeves tried a calmer tone. Look, I heard you had concerns. Let's see if we can resolve them. But behind his words, a vengeful plan churned. Because if he could coerce or manipulate Samuel into dropping the complaint, Reeves might salvage his job. The uneasy meeting was about to spark a twisted confrontation that would upend them both. Inside the cramped interview room, the dog-tired fluorescent bulb flickered overhead. Samuel folded his arms, uneasy. Officer, last time you pulled me over, you harassed me for no reason. So yeah, I want it on record. Reeves leaned forward, voice low. Are you sure you want to escalate this? Mistakes happen. Maybe we sort it out without formalities. The thin veneer of politeness cracked, revealing a menacing undertone. Samuel frowned, resisting intimidation. No, I was singled out and threatened. I'm filing an official complaint. He reached for the form. Reeves, panic fueling him, slammed a hand on the table. Look, if you proceed, I promise your life will be more complicated. My buddy's in the force. You'll get more stops, more eyes on you. The threat was brazen. Samuel's chest tightened with anger and a flicker of fear. Is that how you treat citizens? You can't do that. It's illegal. Reeves sneered. Careful who you call illegal. People like you claim racism at every turn. That stung. Samuel clenched his fist, but stayed calm. I can see you won't let this go. I will. He rose to leave. But Reeves blocked the door, breath reeking of coffee. Don't push me. If you drop the complaint, we can forget all this. The swirl of tension threatened to erupt. But just then, the door opened, a colleague poking in. Reeves, Sarge is looking for you. Freed from the standoff, Samuel pushed past and left. Reeves stood, seething, mind whirling with desperation. Because now more than ever, he realized threatening Turner only worsened his case, and he'd be forced to face consequences. Shaken by Reeves' blatant threat, Samuel retreated from the precinct, relief flooding him at the open air. The entire fiasco reaffirmed the necessity of lodging a complaint. If Reeves was desperate enough to intimidate him, something bigger must be at stake. He dialed the local NAACP chapter, Explaining his predicament, they referred him to a civil rights attorney named Marla Jenkins, who agreed to meet him that same afternoon in a modest law office downtown. Miss Jenkins listened intently to Samuel's story, eyebrows raised at Reeves' brazen bullying. "This is more than a traffic complaint," she concluded. "If an officer is threatening you to drop it, we might have a pattern of misconduct. We can escalate this to internal affairs, file a formal complaint, or go public." Samuel, though nervous about public scrutiny, recognized the necessity. "I just want justice," he said. Miss Jenkins nodded. "Then let's push for it. I'll gather statements, see if others encountered Reeves similarly. If he singled out black motorists, there may be a pattern of racial profiling." The mention of pattern ignited new resolve in Samuel. The dog bark might have signaled a bigger truth in the precinct. Walking out, legal documents in hand, Samuel felt less alone. Meanwhile, Miss Jenkins fired off notices to the department's IA division, requesting an urgent review. In that moment, a chain reaction was triggered, leading to revelations about Reeves's illegal file tampering and culminating in a karmic blow he never saw coming. Word soon reached Reeves that Samuel had hired an attorney and was intensifying the complaint. Tension swelled in Reeves' chest. He realized time was short. The official recommendation for his dismissal hovered in the background, only awaiting final sign-off from the higher-ups. If Turner's new complaint landed, Reeves would have zero chance of appealing or saving his badge. Unable to quell his panic, he doubled down, scouring the precinct system for any dirt on Samuel. He could use any old record or a minor infraction to cast him in a bad light. But it yielded nothing substantial. Samuel had a clean record, just typical traffic stops. Reeves cursed, feeling the walls close in. His intimidation tactics had backfired. At lunch, Reeves confronted a fellow officer, half begging for help. The colleague, aware of A's looming decision, warned him to stand down. "You're only making it worse. If you get caught tampering or harassing, it's a done deal." Reeves, cornered, exploded with frustration, venting about how the department betrays me after years of service. The colleague just shook his head. "Your choices have consequences, man." Reeves left with a sour taste. The illusions of power he once wielded, threatening black motorists, skirting rules, were crumbling. He recognized that his destiny was slipping out of his grasp, ironically triggered by a single man's unwavering stand for justice. Late that week, an official summons from Atlanta Police Department's Internal Affairs landed on Reeves' desk. The letter requested his immediate presence for a formal inquiry, referencing new evidence about his conduct with civilian S. Turner and suspected file tampering. Reeves' heart hammered. "They found out I accessed Turner's file illegally?" His breath grew ragged. If proven, that alone spelled major legal trouble and certain termination. He tried to maintain a stoic facade, though inside, dread churned. Some colleagues observed his haunted expression, suspecting he was on the brink of downfall. Even the senior detective, who once overlooked Reeves' smaller infractions, now avoided eye contact. This scandal was too big to sweep under the rug. Reeves realized he had few allies left. So, in a desperate move, he approached his union rep for legal backing. The rep grimly explained that if evidence of unauthorized database access or intimidation existed, the union might not be able to save him. "You're treading on dangerous ground, Clay," the rep cautioned. "Our hands are tied if you violated civil rights and system protocols." That night, alone in his dingy apartment, Reeves pored over the IA notice. He replayed how he got to this point. A single illegal peek at a file, a wave of intimidation, and the unstoppable tide of accountability. There seemed no easy escape from the avalanche he triggered. Meanwhile, at his tranquil townhouse, Samuel found a measure of relief in the knowledge that Miss Jenkins was pushing the complaint forward. He tried to maintain normalcy, going to work, seeing friends. One evening, Returning from a late shift, he spotted a shadow on his porch. Stepping closer, he saw the same scruffy brown dog, eyes shining in the streetlight. The dog wagged its tail as if recognizing an old friend. Moved, Samuel patted its head. He recalled how this dog had roamed near the precinct the day of his confrontation with Reeves. Perhaps it sensed his turmoil or was drawn to him for reasons unknown. This time, he invited it inside, offering water and leftover chicken. The dog devoured it gratefully, curling at his feet. Something about the dog's unwavering presence comforted him, as though the dog was an omen of perseverance. In that moment, Samuel realized how an entire chain of events might never have escalated if not for the injustice he faced. The dog, once a random observer, had become a symbolic ally. Sighing, Samuel decided to keep the dog around for a while. It was homeless, and ironically, so was he in a figurative sense, displaced by racism's hostility. He named it Lucky. As Lucky dozed, Samuel felt a small spark of hope. Tomorrow, Miss Jenkins had arranged an official meeting with IA, promising real progress. On a humid Monday morning, Samuel and Miss Jenkins arrived at the Atlanta PD's Internal Affairs office, a sterile, windowless corridor with uniformed officers bustling about. They were ushered into a conference room where a panel of 3 IA investigators, plus departmental legal counsel, awaited. Reeves sat on one side of the table, union rep at his shoulder, anxiety etched on his face. The lead investigator, Captain DeMarco, commenced the session, stating the charges: unauthorized file access, potential racial bias, intimidation of a citizen, and possibly tampering with an official record. Reeves fidgeted, trying to maintain composure. Miss Jenkins presented Samuel's statement, detailing how Reeves threatened him. She also introduced digital logs showing Reeves accessed the Turner case file outside his clearance level. The final blow came when Miss Jenkins produced partial transcripts from Reeves' coerced conversation with Samuel, recorded by a voice memo on Samuel's phone. Reeves paled. He stammered about alleged confusion, claiming to be investigating a separate lead. The investigators showed unimpressed stoicism. DeMarco asked him pointedly, "Officer Reeves, do you deny telling Mr. Turner to drop his complaint or face more stops, because the recording says otherwise?" Reeves fell silent, his union rep grimacing. The panel concluded the session swiftly, stating they'd finalize a decision within days. The vibe strongly suggested a recommendation for immediate termination. Reeves left trembling, knowing the unstoppable tide of accountability bore down on him. Within 48 hours, a public statement from the department confirmed Officer Clayton Reeves' immediate dismissal for gross misconduct, citing repeated evidence of racial bias, intimidation, and illegal data tampering. The local press picked up the story, some highlighting it as one step forward in tackling departmental racism. Others, ironically, recalled how a single black man's stand had toppled a toxic officer. Reeves seethed with anger and shame, forced to clean out his locker under the watchful stares of former colleagues. Some pitied him, but most recognized the justice in his downfall. The final blow came when the district attorney launched a deeper probe to see if any of Reeves' prior arrests were compromised by prejudice or illegal methods. The union, limited by the damning evidence, parted ways. He found himself jobless, facing potential civil suits. The dreaded document about his own dismissal, found in Turner's file, had come true in a far more catastrophic manner than he foresaw. Meanwhile, Samuel, leaning on Miss Jenkins, felt a wave of relief and victory. It was no celebration to see a cop's life wrecked, but the accountability was vital. In the following weeks, the precinct promised reforms, mandated new anti-bias training, and the city recognized Miss Jenkins for her unwavering representation. As for the dog Lucky, it remained a beloved companion at Samuel's side, a living reminder of faith in justice. The aftermath of Reeves' firing reverberated through the department. Morale took a hit, but many progressive officers welcomed the purge of an openly bigoted colleague. The chief publicly pledged stronger oversight. Meanwhile, Miss Jenkins used the momentum to advocate for broader reforms, improved data access protocols, more robust complaint filing avenues for minority communities, body cams mandated for all patrols. The City Council took note, passing a resolution to reinforce these measures. Within the community, Samuel Turner's story circulated on social media, a modern David versus Goliath tale of a black man who overcame intimidation. Public sentiment mostly lauded his bravery, though pockets of negativity lingered. Strangers recognized him at grocery lines, offering thanks or fist bumps. Though uneasy about sudden attention, Samuel recognized it might help highlight systemic injustice. One day, in a quiet park, an older gentleman approached, praising Samuel for standing firm. "My grandson once faced a similar cop. Your stand might deter others from silence." Touched, Samuel realized how personal his quest had become for so many. And the dog Lucky, now sporting a new collar and ID tag, became a small local icon whenever they strolled the neighborhood. Though the city's deeper issues with policing or prejudice didn't vanish overnight, a single victory gave impetus for progress, a sign that perseverance plus strategic action could yield justice, no matter how improbable it seemed at first. Weeks after the fiasco, a letter arrived for Samuel from a surprising sender, Clayton Reeves. Samuel stared at the envelope for a while before opening it. Inside, he found a short, shaky note. Reeves apologized for his actions, stating that the scandal had cost him not only his career but also personal relationships. He claimed to have done some soul-searching, acknowledging the damage wrought by his biases. The letter ended with a plea for forgiveness, not for a second chance in the force, but for personal redemption. Samuel was taken aback. He'd never anticipated remorse from Reeves. Unsure how to respond, he took the letter to Miss Jenkins. She advised caution, but recognized the letter as an attempt at sincere contrition. After days of reflection, Samuel wrote a brief reply, expressing that while he accepted Reeves' apology for his own healing, trust was still broken. He hoped Reeves would find a better path forward, free from hate. Mailing that reply felt like a weight off Samuel's chest. He felt no desire to see Reeves suffer more, but neither did he condone his actions. Perhaps it was enough that the wheels of justice had turned, forcing Reeves to confront his wrongdoing. Meanwhile, the city's conversation about racial equity in policing continued, bolstered by stories like Samuel's. Months rolled by, the memory of Reeves' meltdown fading into the city's backdrop. Samuel Turner thrived, focusing on his career in a local tech firm, volunteering part-time with a civil rights advocacy group, and enjoying life with Lucky by his side. The dog, once a straggler near the precinct, seemed content bounding through the dog park. Over time, the story of the dog that barked at injustice became a humorous anecdote among Samuel's circle. He occasionally ran into Miss Jenkins, who was spearheading reforms alongside progressive city leaders. She invited him to speak at a community panel on how everyday citizens can effectively raise complaints without fear. Samuel, initially hesitant, found the courage to share his journey, encouraging others not to let intimidation silence them. The applause he received validated how far he'd come. As for the Atlanta PD, it introduced better training and a more transparent complaint process. Though not perfect, a shift was visible. Quietly, the city recognized that illusions of absolute power among bad cops were crumbling, replaced by an accountability that gave hope to marginalized voices. And so, A chance breach of privacy, Reeves opening Turner's case, had ironically led to the officer's own downfall. Karma arrived swiftly, triggered by the unwavering stand of a man who refused to be bullied. The dog's bark at the figurative coffin of prejudice set the stage for a city's incremental transformation. In the end, Officer Clayton Reeves' unlawful meddling with Samuel Turner's file unleashed precisely the reckoning he'd hoped to avoid, exposing his pattern of racial bias and intimidation, and costing him the very badge he coveted, all because Samuel refused to bow to fear, enlisting the support of a determined lawyer who ensured every lie was laid bare. The dog's symbolic bark, first at the precinct, later tailing Samuel home, embodied a clarion call for truth that overcame even the darkest intimidation. And though Reeves lost his uniform and illusions of untouchable power, the aftermath brought glimmers of hope. The Atlanta PD pledged deeper reforms. Samuel's example emboldened others to demand fairness, and a stray dog found a loving home, its loyalty forever tied to the cause of justice. If this powerful story of forced secrets, unstoppable courage, and surprising karma stirred you, please like, share it widely, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps champion more stories where unwavering spirit triumphs over prejudice and a single bold voice can upend entire systems.